what he's doing to his own children is a form of child abuse, just in the same way as I think his wife is actually abusing him, because I think she's behind all the travails which he's now enduring.
Breaking right now, the BBC, the British bashing corporation as I call them, has done it again, marking its own homework over this biased and completely captured and cut interview with Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, claiming that they did nothing wrong. So let me explain what happened here. A woman called Nada Tawfik, a virtual unknown Californian interviewer and reporter for the BBC, was allowed to sit down with the Duke of Sussex for an interview where we were told no subjects were off limits. But instead of pushing back on his very obvious lies, his very obvious slurs, including, by the way, against the British royal family, who the BBC did not even go to for a right of reply, they simply allowed Harry to spread his propaganda and they broadcast it to the world. I'm going to get reaction from Christine and Neil Hamilton in just one moment, but here's a couple of the low moments from that car crash BBC interview. Now, Nada Tawfik and the BBC did not do their job at all. I mean, I can think of a million things where they should have pushed back, but instead, Nada Tawfik became the new Oprah Winfrey, just allowing Harry's victimhood narrative to go out to millions around the world, in fact, tens of millions around the world, without any type of journalistic response to the lies that he was spreading. Couple of examples. Well, your father paid for your security to the tune of millions of dollars per year for a very long time. And you were warned very clearly that if you were to leave the royal family to set up your own commercial ventures, that security would not be provided by the British state. When it came to his family and trying to suggest that the issues in terms of the relationship being rebuilt are down to Charles and William, why did Nada Tawfik at the BBC not say quite clearly to Harry, okay, this is your opportunity then. Are you rolling back in the claims to Oprah Winfrey that the royal family is racist? That King Charles and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, were racist about your unborn baby. Let's just be clear here. But there was none of that. Nada Tawfik was like the British Oprah Winfrey, nodding along like a nodding dog, because she was so enamored with the fact that she was sitting down to this celebrity. She described him later, by the way, in an article for the BBC website as a celebrity. Well, it doesn't matter if he's a celebrity or not. He is making serious claims about the British royal family and about the British government, and it is your job to question him on the veracity of those rather than allow him to spread his propaganda. So anyway, as I'm sure you could imagine, there was a huge number of complaints about this. And the BBC, in the summary of complaint, which they have now released, admitted we received complaints from people who feel we shouldn't have interviewed Prince Harry and that our approach to this interview and subsequent coverage was biased in his favour. Now, so I agree with two of the parts of the complaints. I absolutely think the BBC had a right to interview Prince Harry. I would interview Prince Harry if he agreed to it. However, the approach to the interview and the subsequent coverage was clearly biased. They didn't do their job as journalists. And it's quite appalling to me that we've now got a succession of BBC interviews with major royal figures, Princess Diana, Prince Andrew, which are just absolutely proof and point that the BBC is not a proper journalistic organisation anymore. Now, the BBC has marked its own homework, as it does, and has decided that they did nothing wrong. So the BBC responded saying, our interview with the Duke of Sussex generated global interest and provided our audience with significant insights into Prince Harry's perspective on losing his latest legal challenge over his security arrangements and his relationship with the royal family. Nada Tawfik's tone and approach was appropriate to the context of this interview, which was conducted hours after this court ruling was announced. Nada gave the prince time to express his views while scrutinising statements he made. I'm sorry, I've got to interrupt there. There was no scrutiny whatsoever. The BBC adds, Nada asked the Duke why the UK taxpayer should fund his security now he was no longer a working royal. Our coverage of this story included the response from Buckingham Palace and the position of the Home Office. Our royal correspondents offered comprehensive analysis of the implications of this interview, examining claims made by the Duke and reflecting that there are those who disputed some points made by the Prince. We also broadcast the remarks of Sir Geoffrey Voss, who was responsible for delivering the Court of Appeal verdict of the 3 judges. We believe our interview with the Prince Harry was duly impartial and in the public interest, highlighting issues of importance to our audience. Well, Christine Hamilton, look, I know we shouldn't be surprised when it comes to the BBC marking its own homework, but do you not think the fundamental mistake that this very inexperienced journalist Nada Tawfik made was treating Prince Harry as if he were a celebrity, and as a result, not providing any scrutiny on his answers? And if you look closely into this case, Christine, which I obviously have over numerous years, it just doesn't stack up what Prince Harry's trying to argue. And remember, Christine, some of his claims were so serious that he's actually suggesting, and again, there was no pushback from the BBC on this, no pushback whatsoever, he's actually suggesting some type of conspiracy from the British government and his own family to knock him off. I mean, it was nuts. And he was just allowed to say it all.
Well, personally, I've never heard of this interviewer, Nadia Tawfik.
No, she's a no mark.
Heard of her. So you really would think that, I mean, they did at least send Emily Maitlis, who is a, whatever you think of her, she has quite a history of broadcasting, to interview Prince Andrew. Why did they send a complete unknown? I mean, I have no idea what experience she's got to interview somebody as important as Prince Harry. This was clearly going to be a very important interview. And you couldn't really have, I mean, the palace were not going to respond to anything. So if you're going to interview Prince Harry, you know perfectly well that if he attacks his own family, they are not going to respond. They never explain, never complain. So in a way, it's a one-way street. But I don't know. I mean, that Oprah Winfrey interview was just unbelievable. It was so stage managed. I mean, Oprah's mouth falling open when you said they were wondering about the colour of your baby. Of course they were. Any mixed marriage that is pregnant, if that makes sense, people, of course, they talk about the colour. I mean, of course they do. And the royal family are no different. They're just a normal family. Yeah. And I was horrified. I saw the bits I didn't sit down and watch the whole interview. I'm not that obsessed by Harry. I suppose in a way he is a celebrity because that word now is so overused, and he ought not to be. He ought to be, I mean, David Beckham is a celebrity. Harry ought not to be. He ought to be a royal prince, but he's not. He's turned himself into a celebrity by marrying Meghan Markle. The bit in that interview that I really found horrifying was when he said something like, talking about his father, we don't know how long he's got. Of course we don't. We don't know how long any of us have got. We could all be dead tomorrow.
No, but he was revealing private information, let's be honest, about King Charles's health battle, and the king and his team, who were prepared to talk about some type of reconciliation with Harry after the verdict came through, are quite rightly livid about that. But livid. Because
that I don't know how long he's got carries with it all sorts of implications and innuendos, which may be correct, they may not be, but people are going to take away more from that remark, possibly even than he intended. But he ought to know better than to say things. He ought to know better than to have done the interview in the first place. Honestly.
But Neil Hamilton, the thing is, right, in this case, I appreciate what Christine is saying. Harry in some ways is a celebrity, right? But in this case, this was a really significant issue, right? It was a issue of national significance involving claims of security, government conspiracy. He had to be scrutinized given the claims he was making. And this is the BBC who are conducting this interview, and there was no scrutiny. And then they're just allowed to say, oh yeah, we did nothing wrong. We did nothing wrong. I mean, it's a joke.
Well, Harry would never have given the interview in the first place if he was going to be subjected to
True.
any scrutiny.
True.
So I wonder what discussions his PRs had with the BBC in getting that interview to take place. My guess is that they hedged the whole thing around with all sorts of restrictions, which the interviewer followed. But
Well, they insist
and
nothing was off limits. And this is why I'm so angry with the BBC, Neil Hamilton, because if genuinely you were in front of Prince Harry and nothing was off limits, and that's what you ask, you have failed as a journalist, and you failed as a journalistic organisation.
Of course, and there are fundamental and obvious questions which you posed in this programme this afternoon, which Prince Harry should be asked in those circumstances, because his claims just don't add up on all sorts of levels. And he's put himself in the position he's now in. He is a celebrity, if all celebrity means is that you are well known, and he is known worldwide for what he is rather than who he is. He hasn't got where he is today by intelligence and hard work, that's for sure. He's now defined by his wife. I suppose I am too, in a way. But
luckily, Neil, you made a good choice. You made a great choice. You made a choice of a woman who enhances you every day. And also, I know, because I know quite a lot about the dynamics of your relationship, wants you to succeed. And isn't that what's so interesting about Meghan and Harry, Christine? It's so obvious that Meghan wants to control and isolate Harry, take him away from all of his family, almost just, destroy him really as a man.
Well, she has, to a certain extent, a considerable extent, emasculated him. And
yes, that's
whether
the
that
word,
was for too long. I can't see this marriage lasting for that long. But can I just say one more thing about the BBC?
Please.
Well, what really annoys me is that with any other broadcasting outfit, you can complain to Ofcom. You see a programme that you don't agree with, and if you don't agree with something on the BBC, who do you think you have to complain to? The BBC. Yeah. Talk about marking your own homework. You have to complain to them. And if you want to, you can then take it up with Ofcom. But they mark their own homework all the time, which is totally wrong. It's a joke. But I mean, no, I think, to be honest, I think Harry is a laughing stock. He has been totally emasculated. She's cut them off. I don't just mean from the family. That's not what I'm talking about. Cut off something rather more personal. Well, she has. Yeah. She obviously rules the roost with a rod of iron. And those poor kids, they have, look at the experiences they could have had. There's a picture of the sort of experiences.
And they're doing this type of weird thing. I mean, Neil, seriously, surely the time has come to say that it is wrong for two children who have never set foot in the United Kingdom in a way that they would remember, right? Have little American accents. Harry has made it quite clear in the BBC interview that they will never be allowed to come to the United Kingdom and meet the King. Isn't it wrong that they're in our line of succession? Isn't it time for that new law to be introduced?
Well, I think it's highly unlikely that Harry will ever be king, because not only have we got Prince William, but we've also got his three children who take precedence over Prince Harry. And I hope that there might be more to come in order to avoid even the most remote possibility of Prince Harry becoming the monarch, because I think that would be the death knell for the royal family, quite frankly. But I'm afraid we have to take pity on Prince Harry more than anything else, because he's clearly so unself-aware and so dim that he can't understand why he's in the state that he is in today. And it's kind of diminished responsibility, really. And I think what he's doing to his own children is a form of child abuse, just in the same way as I think his wife is actually abusing him, because I think she's behind all the travails which he's now enduring. And so I think in many ways, we have to feel sorry for him. I mean, I think he's been extraordinarily damaging to the royal family as an institution in Britain, and mind you, he's not the only one.
I'm sorry, I just can't feel sorry for someone who threw his own family under the bus like that, Christine, and also let alone the stress he put the late Queen Elizabeth II through. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because those children, Christine, I think Neil's right. They may well, in say 10 years' time, even 20 years' time, look back and think, oh my God, we had this opportunity to be part of history and to embrace our heritage. Like, I was born in New Zealand. I'm dual citizen, but my parents are English, my grandparents are English, and I always felt English. I had such a strong connection to this country, and it's something we've discussed a lot, isn't it, over the past few months. It's not about where you're born. That isn't what makes you English. So these two children are English. That's assuming if they are actually born to Meghan and Harry, and that's a whole other conversation. But these two children are English, and they are being denied the right to their heritage, which I think Neil is right to say is a form of abuse of them, is it not, Christine?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm afraid I don't feel sorry for Harry. I mean, he's a complete, frankly, and he's allowed himself to be put in this situation. I wonder how much those kids, and by the way, calling the girl Lilibet, I think was just a... But anyway, let's
which the Queen never wanted. Never wanted.
Of course she did, and she was never asked, and she would never have said yes. But we'll explode if we go into that one. So they've never seen their grandfather on the other side either. Thomas Markle? I wonder how much they know about their ancestry. I wonder if they even know that their grandfather is the King of England. I mean, they may not. And not only are they missing out on the older generation, they're missing out on all the cousins and the siblings. And you showed a photograph just now of Princess Anne. Now, good heavens, if you could have Princess Anne, as I think she'd be a great aunt, wow, you'd be one of the luckiest kids on this earth. And they are denied that. Just totally. To take
and the problem is it's going to be too late once they have the wherewithal to make their own decisions. Absolutely fascinating.
The latest controversy began after Prince Harry sat down for a high-profile interview with the BBC following his legal defeat over UK security arrangements. The interview quickly generated headlines as Harry discussed his ongoing dispute with the British establishment, his concerns about security, and his strained relationship with members of the royal family. However, many viewers felt the interview was unusually sympathetic. Critics argued that Harry was allowed to make significant claims without facing meaningful challenges or follow-up questions. Instead of probing some of the more controversial statements, opponents say the interview gave Harry a platform to repeat grievances that have already dominated headlines for years. This perception immediately fueled accusations of media bias. The strongest criticism focused not necessarily on Harry's comments, but on how the BBC handled the interview. Observers questioned why more difficult questions were not asked. For example, critics argued that Harry should have been challenged on previous allegations made against the royal family, including claims that have been disputed or clarified over time. Others felt that the interviewer failed to address contradictions between Harry's current statements and earlier interviews. As a result, many viewers concluded that the interview lacked balance and failed to provide the scrutiny expected from a major public broadcaster. The BBC later defended its coverage, insisting that the interview was conducted fairly and served the public interest. But the backlash continued. A major factor behind the ongoing conflict remains security. Prince Harry has repeatedly stated that concerns about safety have played a central role in his decisions regarding travel and family interactions. Harry argues that without adequate protection, bringing his family to the United Kingdom becomes significantly more difficult. Critics, however, point out that Harry voluntarily stepped back from royal duties and was informed of the potential consequences regarding taxpayer-funded security. This disagreement remains one of the largest obstacles preventing any meaningful improvement in family relations. Another aspect of the interview that generated discussion involved Harry's comments regarding King Charles. Harry suggested that time is precious and hinted at concerns surrounding his father's health. Some observers felt those remarks were understandable given Charles's public health challenges. Others argued that discussing such sensitive matters publicly was inappropriate and potentially damaging. The reaction once again demonstrated the deep divisions that continue to surround nearly everything Harry says about his family. Looking ahead, the future remains uncertain. Harry continues to speak publicly about his experiences and frustrations. The royal family, meanwhile, largely maintains its long-standing policy of avoiding public disputes. This creates an ongoing imbalance where one side continues speaking while the other remains mostly silent. Whether that dynamic changes in the coming years remains unclear. But what is certain is that public interest in the Sussex story remains extraordinarily high. And every new interview continues to generate fresh controversy. The latest BBC interview has reignited debate about Prince Harry's relationship with the royal family, the role of the media, and the future of Archie and Lilibet. While opinions remain sharply divided, the central issue remains the same. Can the family find a path toward reconciliation before more years are lost? Or has the divide become too deep to repair? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest royal news and analysis. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.